You were told not to touch it. The voice was low, a resonant hum that vibrated through the floor plating where Jax knelt. He froze, hand millimeters from the glowing artifact embedded in the wall of the derelict shuttle. The light from it pulsed with a soft, internal rhythm, casting shifting shadows on the alien woman who had appeared silently beside him. She wasn't tall, but her presence filled the cramped space, emanating a scent that was both sharp and strangely floral, a smell he'd come to associate with danger and something else, something that made his gut twist. Her skin didn't have a color so much as a texture, like polished stone, but across her cheeks and the curve of her throat, lines of soft light pulsed, mimicking the artifact's rhythm. They deepened from a gentle azure to an intense sapphire as her words hung in the air. "Didn't touch it," Jax muttered, slowly pulling his hand back. He wiped dust onto his worn synth leather pants. "Just looking, trying to figure out what it is." "It is not for you to figure." The blue lines intensified, a warning. Her name was Lyra. It was the closest human sound he could make to the complex series of hums and clicks and light pulses she used to identify herself. She moved with a fluid grace that was unsettlingly quiet, alien, even after weeks aboard this derelict station, picking through the scraps left behind by whatever ancient culture had built it. "It is ours." "It carries echoes." "Echoes of what? Lunch?" Jax pushed himself to his feet, trying to inject his usual weary sarcasm into the conversation. It usually bounced off her like light off reinforced plating. She was utterly serious, intensely focused. Her eyes, large and deep without visible pupils, stared at him. The blue lines on her face seemed to scrutinize his every micro-expression. Echoes of purpose, of belonging. The hum in her voice lowered, becoming almost mournful. "Things you do not understand, scavenger." "Hey, I understand purpose," he retorted, leaning against the bulk of the shuttle's engine casing. "My purpose is not starving to death out here. Yours seems to be, guarding broken glow sticks." The blue lights on her face flared, a sharp, angry indigo now. "They are not glow sticks. They are fragments of the Great Lattice. They hold the memory of our convergence." Right, convergence. He'd heard bits and pieces of her stories, strange tales of dispersed species, scattered by some ancient catastrophe, their collective consciousness somehow tied to these glowing tech fragments. It sounded like spiritual nonsense wrapped in advanced science. "Look, I get it, they're important to you. But we're running out of power, water's recycling thin, and we need components. Real components. That thing looks like it could power a small city, if I could figure out how to tap it." Lyra glided closer, her movements almost predatory. The scent intensified, a dizzying mix of sweetness and something metallic. It made his head swim in a way that wasn't entirely unpleasant, despite the tension radiating from her. "You would destroy memory for power?" "Memory doesn't boil water, Lyra, or fix a jump drive." He held her gaze, refusing to back down. Her face was unlike anything human. Sculpted planes, those unnerving pupilless eyes, the shifting bioluminescent patterns. But there was a strange, compelling beauty to it, especially when the light line softened, which wasn't often. Some memories are more vital than sustenance. Her voice was softer now, the indigo fading back to a concerned azure. She reached out a hand, fingers long and tipped with delicate, non-human pads, and laid it gently on the wall near the artifact. The artifact's glow pulsed in response, and a faint resonance, like distant chimes, filled the air. Jax felt in his chest, a strange pressure. It wasn't just pretty lights and stories. There was power here, a different kind than he was used to, but power nonetheless. She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "You feel it?" He swallowed. "Something, like a hum, in my bones." A flicker of something crossed her features, perhaps surprise, or maybe something warmer. The blue lines on her cheek pulsed with a new, softer frequency. "You are attuned for a scavenger." "Guess scavenging isn't just about busted chrome," he mumbled, feeling suddenly awkward under her intense, unblinking stare. The small space, the shared air, the pulsing light and strange scent. It was all pressing in on him, making him intensely aware of the physical difference between them, and the strange pull that had developed despite it. He wanted to touch the glowing artifact, yes, but he also, inexplicably, wanted to reach out and trace one of those luminous lines on her face. The thought startled him. He pulled back physically, putting a hand on the shuttle's frame. So, if we can't use it for power, what can we do with it? Aside from you staring at it reverently? We can try to integrate it, Lyra said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial level. The blue lines on her face flared, then shifted to a vibrant green, a color he hadn't seen before. It felt like intrigue, excitement. If it is a fragment of the lattice, it may contain a node of the ancient network, a way to call others. Jax frowned. You mean like, your people? Are there more of you out here? Perhaps, she said, a new intensity in her gaze. The green deepened, almost shimmering. If the lattice still hums, even in pieces, it is why I came to this sector, this station. The echoes here were strongest. She looked back at the artifact, a yearning visible in the lines on her face, now shifting between green and a soft, hopeful gold. If we can activate it, link it. Maybe they will hear. Okay, link it. How? He was skeptical, but the gold and green light on her face was captivating. It was like watching her thoughts unfold visually. You got a giant charger somewhere? A spiritual ritual? What? It requires resonance. Lyra turned back to him, her gaze fixed. The golden light pulsed stronger. A focused energy signature. Something powerful. Something attuned. She took a step closer, the sweet metallic scent growing stronger, almost overwhelming in confined space. Her non-human eyes seemed to widen slightly. The gold on her face flared, then pulsed, drawing his gaze. You felt the hum. Human. You are attuned. Perhaps your energy could provide the resonance. Jax felt a chill, not from the station's cold, but from her words. My energy? What does that even mean? You want me to stick my hand on it? Not precisely. Lyra moved closer still, invading his personal space entirely. He could feel the faint warmth radiating from her body. The gold light on her face seemed to ripple now, extending down her neck and onto her shoulders in intricate patterns. Her voice was a low hum, vibrating in his chest. The ancient lattice responded to connection, not just physical, deeper, a resonance of shared being. It amplified the individual within the collective. She reached out a hand, not toward the artifact, but towards him. Her long fingers hovered inches from his chest, just over his worn jumpsuit. The golden light on her palm pulsed, warm and inviting. Perhaps, if two disparate resonance patterns were brought into close proximity, focus, amplify, the scent, the light, her proximity, it was too much. His heart hammered against his ribs. It sounded like she wanted to use him as a battery, or worse. But the look in her eyes, the soft, hopeful gold in her light patterns, suggested something entirely different, something that made his cynical mind falter. It felt less like a threat and more like an offering, or a dangerous experiment. What are you saying, Lyra? He managed, his voice rough. What kind of resonance? What kind of proximity? Lyra tilted her head slightly, her eyes holding his. The golden light intensified, spreading like liquid fire across her features, chasing away the blue and green entirely. It pulsed with an almost frantic energy, mirrored by the increasing hum from the artifact behind her. The sweet metallic scent blossomed, filling his senses. The kind that aligns, that merges, that resonates on the deepest level. The kind that creates. Overflow. Her hand moved closer, a gentle warmth radiating from her palm towards his skin. The air crackled with unseen energy. His own body felt strange, hyper-aware, pulsing with an unfamiliar rhythm. He instinctively reached out, wanted to touch her, to feel the light beneath his fingers, to understand the hum that now seemed to be originating from within him as much as from the artifact. His fingertips brushed against the edge of her palm, and the world seemed to tilt. The light from the artifact flared violently, bathing them both in a blinding golden wash, and the hum became a roar. He stumbled back, his heart pounding, the taste of ozone on his tongue. Lyra gasped, withdrawing her hand as the light subsided back to its gentle pulse. The golden patterns on her face were still there, vibrant, but mixed now with confusion and something else, something that looked suspiciously like raw emotion. She stared at her hand, and at him, her strange eyes wide. The artifact hummed softly, seemingly unaffected, but the air between them was thick with unseen energy, a palpable tension that had nothing to do with scavenged tech and everything to do with the space they had just shared. What? What was that? Jax asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra didn't answer immediately. The golden light on her face shifted, swirling with hints of confused azure. She looked stunned, as if she hadn't expected such a strong reaction. Her gaze lingered on his chest, then rose to meet his eyes. A slow flush of deeper gold spread across her cheeks, a pattern he hadn't seen before, something that felt profoundly private. I do not know, she finally breathed, her voice a low, shaky hum. It was more than I anticipated. The resonance, it was chaotic, intense. She took a small step back, breaking the intense proximity, but the air between them still vibrated. The sweet metallic scent lingered, now tangled with the smell of burnt ozone. The silence stretched, filled only by the soft pulse of the artifact and the ragged sound of his own breathing. He watched the light patterns on her face, trying to decipher the story they were telling. Confusion, shock, and something else, something that felt like the beginning of a very dangerous, very unpredictable connection. He rubbed his chest, where her hand had hovered, feeling the phantom warmth and the persistent hum. This was definitely not just about fixing a jump drive anymore. The low thrum of the station's failing life support was a constant reminder of their predicament, a counterpoint to the faint, persistent hum from the artifact Lyra was now meticulously studying from a respectful distance. Jax watched her from the opposite side of the shuttle bay. The light patterns on her face were muted now, primarily a calm, analytical azure mixed with focused green, as she ran a handheld scanner over the glowing fragment. The intense gold from their previous interaction was gone, tucked away, though the memory of its warmth and intensity lingered, a strange ghost on his skin. "Find anything useful?" he asked, breaking the silence. His voice sounded rough even to his own ears. He was trying to project nonchalance, the usual cynical detachment. It wasn't working. Every time he looked at her, he saw the flush of golden light, felt the dizzying scent, heard the tremor in her voice. Lyra lowered the scanner, her gaze sweeping over him before returning to the artifact. "It is, as I suspected, a fragment of the ancient network, but it is dormant, severed from the whole, the resonance we generated. It caused a temporary surge, like a dying star briefly flaring. So my attuned energy just gave a twitch?" He pushed off the wall he was leaning against, walking slowly towards her. Not enough to call others? No. The azure and green deepened slightly, suggesting disappointment. Not enough to project, to reach beyond this immediate space. She gestured around the derelict bay. The link was localized, focused, upon the source. "Meaning me?" She nodded slowly. "And the artifact, our combined signature, it resonated, but it did not flow outward. It turned inward." "Right, inward." He stopped a few feet away from her. The air still felt charged. "And what does inward mean in terms of ancient glowing tech in my personal space?" Lyra turned fully to face him. The green on her face faded, leaving only the calm, steady azure. But there was a new stillness about her, a focused intensity that wasn't just about the tech. "It means..." The resonance was contained within the immediate field. The energy did not seek the lattice. It sought connection. Her voice was low, a gentle hum that resonated within his own chest. "Connection," he repeated, the word feeling strangely heavy. "Between us?" "Between the two sources of resonance," she clarified, but the azure pulsed, a shade deeper, and he knew she meant them. "Your energy signature. It is unlike any I have encountered. It is chaotic, as I said, but strong. And responsive to your ancient tech, or responsive to..." He trailed off, gesturing vaguely between them. He felt absurdly awkward. This was Lyra, the intensely serious alien who treated him like a necessary, slightly irritating tool. And now she was talking about resonance and connection in a way that felt profoundly personal. Lyra watched him, her strange eyes steady. The azure light shifted, taking on a quality that was difficult to read. Maybe curiosity, maybe something akin to fascination. My culture. We bonded through the lattice, shared resonance. It was how we knew each other, how we were one. She paused, looking away for a moment, the azure dimming slightly, tinged with sorrow. The dispersion, it shattered that. We are fragments, scattered, alone. She looked back at him, and the azure brightened, mixing with fragile, uncertain gold. To feel a resonance again, even one so chaotic, it is surprising. Surprising. He took another step closer, drawn by the subtle shift in her light patterns, the hint of vulnerability beneath the usual stoicism. Good surprise? Bad surprise? Neither. Both. She moved her hand again, slowly, towards him, stopping midway. The golden tint on her azure lines pulsed hesitantly. It creates questions I have not considered. Like what? Like, is resonance possible outside the lattice? She didn't look away. Is connection possible with one who is not my kind? One whose very energy is alien? I think we just answered that, he said quietly, the words feeling like a confession. He felt the lingering warmth, the strange hum. It wasn't just his imagination. There was something between them, something that flared to life when their energy fields, or whatever she called them, had met. When we touched, it felt like... He searched for the words, inadequate as they were. Like static, but warm, like being seen. Her non-human eyes widened slightly again, mirroring the subtle flare of gold on her face. Seen, she repeated, the word a soft hum. Yes, that is part of it. She lowered her hand slowly. The lattice allowed us to perceive the deepest layers of another's being. Their history, their intent, their resonance, to be truly seen. And you saw that in me? He felt exposed, laid bare in a way he hadn't been in years. His past was a mess he kept buried deep. The idea that this alien woman, with her glowing skin and strange ways, had somehow glimpsed it was unnerving. I saw chaos, she corrected, the gold fading, the azure returning to a calmer state. But within the chaos, a core, a resonant frequency. Damaged, perhaps, suppressed, but present. Suppressed is putting it mildly, he muttered, looking away. Back at the dark, silent interior of the shuttle bay. Years of running, of hiding, of avoiding getting close to anyone or anything. It had built walls around that core. He preferred it that way. It was safer. But now Lyra was talking about resonance and connection, shaking the foundations of those walls. Why? She asked, her voice soft, drawing his gaze back. The azure lines held a steady, calm inquiry. Why suppress it? He shrugged, uncomfortable. Survival. Out here, that kind of visibility. It makes you a target. Better to be gray, blurry. Better to be alone? The question was gentle, but it hit hard. The azure on her face pulsed with what felt like empathy, a soft wave of light. He didn't answer immediately. He was alone. He had been for a long time. It was the price of staying alive, of not relying on anyone who could betray you, of not losing anyone you cared about. But the past few weeks, stuck on the station with Lyra, dealing with her intense focus and alien quirks, watching the light patterns on her face reveal emotions she didn't speak aloud. It had been less lonely, and the moments when her physical presence had been close, like just now by the artifact, had stirred something deep within him, something he thought was long dead. It works, he finally said, meeting her gaze. Being alone, it keeps you alive. But alive is not the same as living, Lyra responded, her voice a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate with ancient sorrow. The azure light on her face shifted, taking on a faint, deep violet hue, a color he hadn't seen before. It felt like profound sadness. She turned back to the artifact, her long fingers hovering near it again, but not touching. My people, we were vibrant when the lattice sang. Connected. Now, we merely exist. Scattered. Searching. Alone. She was talking about her species. But the echoes of his own life were deafening. Searching. Alone. He felt a sudden, unexpected urge to close the distance between them, to reach out and touch the violet light on her face, to offer some form of comfort. But he hesitated, unsure how to bridge the gap, not just the physical space, but the gulf between their species, their experiences, their very ways of being. The artifact pulsed softly behind her, a reminder of the strange energy that had sparked between them. He watched her, the violet light on her skin a silent testament to her pain, and felt a knot of unresolved tension tighten in his chest. He didn't know what this connection was, or where it was leading, but he knew, with a certainty that was both terrifying and exhilarating, that it was no longer just about surviving on a dying station. Days blurred into a routine dictated by the station's slow decay and their shared, unspoken tension. They scavenged together, him using his knowledge of human tech and bypasses, her using an intuitive understanding of the station's structure and the strange, underlying energy currents that pulsed through its ancient conduits. Their dialogue became a blend of practical problem-solving, awkward silence, and bursts of strangely intimate conversation, often sparked by Lyra's observations about human behavior or Jax's clumsy attempts to understand her culture. The bioluminescent patterns on her face became his primary language, the soft azure of calm, the sharp indigo of frustration, the fleeting gold of curiosity or surprise, the deep violet of sorrow. He found himself watching her face more than the derelict corridors they navigated. One cycle. Exploring a section of the station that seemed untouched by time or scavengers, they stumbled upon a chamber filled with intact alien technology. It wasn't weapons or power generators, but intricate structures of woven light and humming crystals. Lyra's entire body seemed to resonate as they entered. The lights on her face flared, a brilliant, pulsing gold mixed with vibrant green, a combination he now recognized as intense focus and anticipation. Her voice was a low, reverent hum. This is a node chamber, smaller than the great lattice sites, but intact. She moved through the chamber with a grace that was both alien and deeply moving, her hand hovering over the luminous structures. The echoes here, they are strong. What is it for? Jax asked, his voice quiet in the humming chamber. The air felt different here, cleaner, charged with a gentle energy that made the hairs on his arms stand up. Integration, Lyra breathed, turning back to him, her face radiating golden light. To connect, to share consciousness, to become more than one. He felt a prickle of unease. The concept was beautiful in a terrifying way. Share consciousness? Like read minds? Not precisely. More like a merging of being, a perspective, to understand another's core resonance, their history, their needs, as if they were your own. She walked towards him, the golden light intensifying. It is how we were a unified people, how we made decisions, built wonders, how we loved. The last word was a soft pulse of light and sound, barely audible, but it vibrated through him. Love, the concept applied to her species, and the strange technology, felt both vast and incredibly small, focusing entirely on the two of them in this humming chamber. You said my resonance was chaotic, he said, his voice tight. Could this node handle that? Lyra stopped inches away from him. The gold light pulsed, swirling with a new, hesitant shade of rose, a color that made his breath catch. Rose? What did rose mean? It felt fragile. I do not know, she admitted, her gaze fixed on his. My people's resonances were harmonious, aligned by the lattice since emergence. Yours is wild, untamed. She reached out a hand, the rose gold light shimmering on her fingers, but strong, so strong. Her hand hovered near his chest again, just as it had by the artifact. The air between them thickened, humming with the energy of the chamber and the unspoken tension that always seemed to coil around them now. He could smell the sweet metallic scent, stronger here, mixed with the clean, sharp scent of the chamber's energy. He wanted to pull away, to protect the untamed core she spoke of, but he also wanted desperately to feel the rose gold light on his skin, to see what integration felt like with Lyra. What happens if the resonance isn't harmonious? He asked, his voice low. Lyra's non-human eyes seemed to deepen, pulling him in. The rose gold light pulsed faster, mimicking his own quickening heartbeat. It could be disruptive, painful, or it could create something new, something unexpected. She moved her hand slowly, deliberately, and this time she didn't stop. Her fingers, cool and smooth against his jumpsuit, touched his chest. The effect was instantaneous, but different from the brief jolt by the artifact. It wasn't chaotic energy. It was a deep, penetrating warmth that spread through his ribs, into his lungs, his heart. It was like a tuning fork resonating within his very being. The humming of the chamber intensified, and the luminous structures pulsed with synchronicity that hadn't been there before. He felt a sudden, overwhelming influx of sensation, not his own, a vast, empty sorrow, like the echo of a scattered people, a yearning for connection, so profound it felt like a physical ache. And beneath it all, a core of fierce determination, a will to survive and rebuild. It was Lyra's resonance. He was feeling her. His hands instinctively came up, gripping her shoulders. Her skin felt like warm, polished stone beneath the fabric of his suit. The rose gold light on her face flared, mirroring the intensity of connection. Her eyes were wide, focused entirely on him. He saw or felt her shock at the raw, chaotic energy that met hers, his own suppressed core, suddenly exposed, broadcasting years of pain, loss, anger, and a buried, desperate longing for something he hadn't allowed himself to name. Lyra, he breathed, her name a rough whisper. Human, she responded, her voice a startled hum. The rose gold light on her face swirled, mixed with the returning violet of sorrow and a new, vibrant crimson he'd never seen. Crimson felt like passion, or perhaps, in her alien context, intense emotional reaction. The chaotic energy of his core seemed to clash with her focused sadness and burgeoning crimson, creating a whirlwind of sensation between them. It wasn't painful, not exactly, but it was overwhelming, a torrent of alien emotion and suppressed human pain meeting in a space designed for a harmonious merging. It's too much, he gasped, the sheer volume of sensation staggering him. Her sorrow, her yearning, her strange, intense crimson emotion, it flooded his senses, threatening to drown him. Yes, she hummed, her own voice strained. The rose gold and crimson on her face pulsed wildly. Chaotic, yet it is resonating. Her hands, cool against his chest, moved, gripping the fabric of his suit. But it feels right? Right? How could this cacophony of clashing emotions and energies feel right? It was jarring, disorienting. But beneath the overwhelm, there was a strange sense of homecoming, of finally understanding the silent language she'd been speaking with her light patterns. He felt her fear, her hope, her profound aloneness, and his own mirrored them in a way that was both terrifying and intoxicating. The physical intimacy of their clasped hands, the close proximity in the humming chamber, was suddenly charged with an unbearable emotional weight. He wanted to pull away, to break the connection, to retreat behind his walls. But he couldn't. He was trapped in the overwhelming resonance of her. Lyra, we have to. He started, but her grip tightened on his suit. No, she hummed, her strange eyes locking onto his. The crimson pulsed, fierce and compelling. Not yet. This is discovery. This is the overflow. The crimson light flared across her face, pushing back the sorrow and the rose gold, leaving only an intense, vibrant hue that seemed to hum with raw, alien desire. Your chaos, it is answering. Let it answer fully. And with that, she leaned into him, her forehead touching his, the cool, smooth, stone-like skin against his brow. The world dissolved into the humming of the chamber, the intense, clashing resonance between them, and the overwhelming, intoxicating scent of Lyra. He was lost in the overflow. The aftermath of the node chamber was a jumbled mess of sensation and confusion. They had collapsed onto the floor plating, tangled together. The air thick with the residual energy and the lingering, potent scent of Lyra. The humming of the chamber subsided slowly, leaving behind a pulsing silence. Jax lay there, heart hammering, every nerve ending alight. He felt raw, exposed. He had felt Lyra's core being, her alien pain and fierce yearning, and in turn, she felt his own suppressed chaos, the buried wreckage of his past. It was intimacy on a level he hadn't conceived possible, a merging of souls before even a full understanding of bodies. Lyra stirred beside him, her movements slow. The light patterns on her face were muted, a soft, tired azure mixed with lingering, hesitant rose. The intense crimson from moments before was gone, replaced by something calmer but still deeply resonant. She shifted, pulling away slightly, and the sense of profound connection, of shared being lessened, leaving a sharp ache of separation. He immediately missed the overwhelming influx of her emotions, the bizarre comfort of not being alone inside his own head. What happened? He asked, his voice hoarse. Lyra pushed herself up, sitting back on her heels. She looked different. Her non-human eyes seemed softer, the lines on her face holding a fragile vulnerability he hadn't seen before. The rose light on her cheeks pulsed faintly, like a bruise. The node. It facilitated a convergence of our resonances, she hummed, her voice still low and shaky. It allowed us to perceive, deeply, to share. A fragment of self. A fragment. It felt like she'd peeled him open and seen everything. Yes, true convergence. It is a lifetime's work. It requires balance. Harmony. Our resonances are disparate. Yours, chaotic. Mine, fragmented by sorrow. She looked down at her hands, turning them over. The rose light pulsed. But the node, it amplified the latent attunement between us. Force a temporary. Overflow. Overflow, he repeated, the word carrying a new weight. It hadn't been just a surge of power for the artifact. It had been an emotional, existential deluge. He remembered the feel of the rose and crimson light, the overwhelming wash of her emotions. What did you see? Lyra raised her head, meeting his gaze. The rose light deepened slightly. I saw pain, deeply embedded, layers of shielding, a core of resilience, but also a profound aloneness, an emptiness. She paused, her eyes searching his. Why do you carry so much pain, human? The directness of the question, amplified by the knowledge that she had felt it, stripped away his defenses. He could lie, deflect, but after what they'd just experienced, it felt pointless. Lost people, he said, his voice flat. Betrayal. Had to learn not to need anyone, not to let anyone in. To survive? The violet light, the color of sorrow, ghosted across her face. I understand survival. My people, we have only fragments of that now. Survival, without connection, it is diminished. Yeah, well, connection gets you killed, he retorted, the old cynicism surfacing like a reflex. But the rose light on her face pulsed, pushing back the violet. It felt like a gentle contradiction. And yet, your resonance responded, desired connection, desired. The overflow. Her eyes dropped to his mouth for a brief moment, and the rose light flared with an intensity that was unmistakable, even to his human understanding. It was desire, alien, perhaps, in its origin and expression, but undeniably desire. He felt a jolt of pure physical attraction, raw and unexpected after the emotional maelstrom. He had been drawn to her strange beauty, her intensity, her otherness from the start. But now, knowing what lay beneath the surface, having felt her soul, the physical pull was amplified 1,000-fold. He saw the rose light, felt the lingering scent, and wanted to bridge the small space between them again, not just for resonance, but for something tangible, something physical. Is that what the rose light means? He asked, his voice low. Lyra hesitated, looking away for a moment. The rose light on her face dimmed slightly, replaced by a flush of deep azure, suggesting embarrassment or shyness, emotions he hadn't seen from her before. When she looked back, the rose returned hesitant but present. It is Complex, she hummed. In my language of light, it is resonance-aligned attraction, a longing for continued convergence. Continued convergence, he repeated, letting the alien phrase settle. It wasn't, I want you. It was something deeper, stranger, tied to their unique experience in the node chamber. But the underlying meaning was clear. You want to feel that again? Yes. She met his gaze directly, the rose light pulsing. With you, the chaos. It is not harmonious in the way of my people's past convergence, but it is compelling. It creates new patterns, new understanding. She gestured vaguely between them, and the physical proximity during resonance, it adds a layer, a different kind of signal. He understood different kind of signal. He felt it pulsing between them right now. The energy of the node chamber was fading, but the energy of their connection, the overflow, was very much alive. It was in the air, in the scent, in the way the rose light pulsed on her face, in the way his body was reacting to her proximity. Okay, he said, his voice rough. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and gently touched her cheek, right on one of the rose-lit lines. Her skin was smooth, cool, but where his fingertip met the light, he felt a strange, internal warmth, a vibration. The rose light under his touch flared brilliantly. Let's create some new patterns, Lyra. Some more. Overflow. Her non-human eyes fluttered closed for a brief moment at his touch, and a soft, shuddering hum escaped her lips. The rose light spread across her face, down her neck, across her shoulders, a vibrant, living blush. When her eyes opened again, they were intensely focused on his, filled with a look that was both alien and universally recognizable in its raw need. She leaned into his touch, her forehead resting against his palm. Yes, she hummed, the sound vibrating through his hand, through his arm, into his very core. Just a little more. Make me overflow. The air in the node chamber crackled with a new intensity. It wasn't the humming of the ancient tech this time, but the palpable energy between them. With her head resting against his hand, Lyra's light patterns shifted, a mesmerizing dance of rose and deep, vibrant crimson. It was chaos, just as she had described his own energy, but in her it felt urgent, compelling. He slid his hand from her cheek, letting it cup the back of her head. Her smooth skin felt alien and perfect against his palm. He pulled her gently towards him, closing the small distance. Her body was different, yes, lithe, graceful, the texture of her skin and the subtle shifts in her form alien, but the fundamental truth of another being pressed against him was universal. He felt the curve of her shoulders, the yielding strength of her form, her sweet metallic scent, mixed with the clean energy smell of the chamber and the heady aroma of her emotions, filled his senses. Their mouths met awkwardly at first, a tentative press of alien softness against human familiarity. Her lips, if they could be called that, were cool and smooth, unlike anything he'd ever felt. But as the rose and crimson light on her face pulsed, intensifying with alarming speed, the kiss deepened. Her hand came up, finding his jaw, fingers tracing the rough stubble there. The touch sent a jolt through him, a different kind of resonance, purely physical, intensely grounding after the flight through pure emotion in the node. Her hum deepened, becoming a low, throaty sound that vibrated against his lips. It was a sound of pleasure, of burgeoning intensity. The light on her face was almost blinding now, a solid wash of pulsating crimson and rose. It felt like she was broadcasting her desire, her need, directly into him, bypassing words entirely. He responded instinctively, pulling her closer, deepening the kiss, exploring the strange landscape of her alien form with his hands. He felt the delicate ridges on her shoulders, the strange fluidity of her spine as she arched into him. Her skin was warm now, radiating heat wherever he touched her. The scent was overwhelming, intoxicating, making his head spin. This wasn't the slow burn he was used to, the careful dance of human courtship. This was fast, immediate, fueled by the raw, exposed emotion of the overflow and the simple, undeniable physical attraction that had been simmering beneath the surface. She pulled back slightly, eyes wide and dark, filled with a crimson and rose light. Her voice was a breathless hum. The resonance, it deepens with physical alignment. Yeah, he managed his own breath ragged. It does. He kissed her again, less tentatively this time, driven by a need that felt ancient and new all at once. He wasn't thinking about her alienness anymore, not in terms of fear or detachment. He was thinking about the way her body felt pressed against his, the intoxicating scent, the mesmerizing, urgent pulse of light on her skin, the way she hummed deep in her throat. It was raw, primal, intense. They moved together, shedding layers of protective synth leather. The alien touch of her smooth skin against his own sending shivers down his spine. The node chamber, designed for the merging of minds, became a space for the convergence of bodies. Lyra's form, so unlike his own, was a revelation. The way the light patterns shifted and intensified with every touch, every shared breath, was a language of desire more potent than any words. Her hums escalated from deep rumbling vibrations to sharper, higher-pitched sounds that vibrated directly in his bones. The sweet metallic scent thickened, became almost unbearable in its intensity, pushing him closer to the edge. He watched the crimson and rose light race across her skin, uncontrolled, raw. It was her overflow, manifested physically, emotionally, and his own response was equally overwhelming. Years of suppressed need and loneliness, finding release in the alien, intoxicating reality of Lyra. He felt the chaos within him aligning, for the first time, not with order, but with her chaos, creating a new, potent resonance that consumed them both. Later, they lay tangled on the cold floor plating of the node chamber, the humming of the ancient tech barely audible over the sound of their breathing. Lyra's light patterns had softened again, a mix of tired azure, hesitant rose, and a new, soft gold that felt like contentment. Her head rested on his chest, her strange, cool skin a comforting weight. The intoxicating scent lingered, less overwhelming now, a subtle, intimate perfume. He ran a hand over her smooth back, feeling the delicate structure beneath. It was still unbelievable, the leap they had taken, from wary cohabitants to sharing the deepest parts of themselves in the overflow to this raw, physical intimacy. That, he said into the quiet, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't name, was not what I expected. Lyra stirred, tilting her head up to look at him. The soft gold in her light patterns brightened. Expected what, scavenger? The old nickname, spoken now with a new softness, felt like a term of endearment. Any of it, he admitted. The resonance thing, feeling, everything, and then this. He gestured vaguely between them. Didn't think. I thought I was done with connection. Connection finds its way, she hummed, the gold light pulsing gently. Sometimes it requires chaos, an unexpected alignment. She settled back down, her head heavy on his chest. Your chaos, it does not feel wrong. It feels like truth. Truth. His truth was messy, painful, but held against Lyra's sorrow and yearning, amplified by her strange, beautiful light and scent it felt. Seen. Understood. A sudden, jarring klaxon blared through the station. A high-pitched, insistent wail that cut through the quiet intimacy of the chamber. Jax tensed, years of ingrained caution overriding everything else. What is that? He asked, pushing Lyra gently aside as he scrambled to his feet. Lyra was already up, her movement swift and fluid. The light patterns on her face shifted instantly from soft gold and azure to sharp, angry indigo and a new, urgent red he hadn't seen. Red felt like danger, alarm, intrusion, she hummed, her voice devoid of recent softness. Ship docking. Non-station ID. Who? He asked, pulling on his jumpsuit, his mind racing. Other scavengers? Slavers? Corporate scouts? None of the options were good. Do not know, Lyra replied, already moving towards the chamber entrance. The indigo and red light flashed urgently across her face. But they are not friendly. They have breached the outer perimeter. She looked back at him, her strange eyes filled with that intense, dangerous red light. Our resonance. It may have been perceived. Drawn them here. His blood ran cold. Drawn them here? Their intimacy, their connection, their overflow, had it somehow sent a signal, a flare in the dark that Hostile Eyes had seen? It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about protecting Lyra. And suddenly, that felt more important than anything else. "We need to move," he said, grabbing his basic sidearm, the only weapon he kept. "Find a place to hide. Or fight." Lyra nodded, the red light fierce on her face. "Fight," she hummed, the word a low growl. "If they come for the lattice fragments. Or for me. We fight." She didn't elaborate on why they might come for her, but the intensity in her gaze, the shift from fragile intimacy to fierce protectiveness, told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't just an exile. She was something valuable, something dangerous people would hunt. The brief, shared overflow in the node chamber had forged a connection, but it also, it seemed, painted a target on their backs. The intimacy had earned them not just emotional closeness, but immediate external peril. They moved quickly, slipping out of the node chamber and back into the derelict corridors of the station. The klaxon continued its grating wail, a constant reminder of the encroaching threat. Lyra's light patterns remained a volatile mix of indigo and red, her movements sharp, alert. Jax, relying on his knowledge of the station's layout and his instinct for survival, led them deeper into a maze of abandoned sections. "They'll probably head for the main power core first," he muttered as they moved through a darkened cargo bay, their footsteps echoing. "Or any known tech depots." "The lattice fragments," Lyra corrected, her voice a low hum, tight with tension. "They seek the echoes. My people's technology is unique, prized." The indigo on her face pulsed. Perhaps they traced the surge from the node chamber. The overflow. "Yeah, maybe our little connection broadcasts our location," he said, the thought a bitter pill. Their intimacy, the beautiful, chaotic merging they'd just experienced, had endangered them. "Great. Do not regret it," Lyra said sharply, stopping it with a hand on his arm. The red light flared, intense. The resonance, the overflow, it is not something to regret. She looked at him, her strange eyes filled with fierce resolve that melted some of his cynicism. It was real. Whatever comes, that was real. He held her gaze for a moment, seeing the genuine conviction in her alien features. He couldn't argue. The intensity of the overflow, the feeling of being utterly seen and accepted in his messiness, was something he wouldn't trade, even for safety. "Okay," he conceded. "Real. Still put us in a bind." They pressed on, seeking the station's less traveled routes. The klaxon abruptly cut out, plunging the station into a deeper, unnerving silence. "They found the central control," Jax whispered. "Probably cut power everywhere but where they need it. Security systems are offline now." "They are systematic," Lyra hummed, her expression grim. "These are not random scavengers." "You know who they are?" he asked. "I suspect." The indigo on her face deepened to a near-black shade, a color of pure dread. "The collectors, they track down scattered fragments of my people, both tech and individuals." Her gaze met his, and the red light returned, sharper this time, mixed with a cold, hard resolve. "They take the tech, and they integrate the individuals into their own network, forcing resonance, stripping the self." His gut clenched. Force resonance? Stripping the self? The words echoed the concept of the node chamber, twisted into something horrifying. This wasn't just about valuable tech. It was about enslavement, about stealing the very essence of Lyra's being. "We need to hide," he said, urgency spiking. "Hiding will only delay the inevitable," Lyra replied, her voice steely. "They will find the artifacts. And the artifacts, they will sense my presence, draw them to me. So what's the plan? Take on a ship full of these collectors with my busted sidearm? We find the largest intact lattice fragment," Lyra said, her eyes scanning the dark corridor as she spoke. The indigo and red lights pulsed with strategic thought. "The one in the central node hub. It is the most powerful on this station. If we can access its full potential, perhaps it can create a distortion, a wave of resonance powerful enough to repel them, or to mask my signature entirely." "Access its potential?" How? He asked. We barely managed to tickle that artifact in the shuttle. That was a mere fragment, Lyra explained, moving forward again, a new sense of purpose in her step. The central node is larger, and it requires a more powerful catalyst, a focused, intense resonance. She glanced back at him, and the red light on her face held a flicker of the crimson from the chamber, now tempered by danger. The overflow we created, that level of resonance, it is the key. He stopped, his hand tightening on his sidearm. You want to do that again? The overflow? With a giant alien artifact possibly hooked up to it? It is the only way, she stated, her gaze unwavering. My resonance alone is not strong enough, not in this fragmented state. Your chaos, it unlocks something in the smaller fragment, amplified the potential. With the central node, it could be exponentially more powerful. She took his hand, her touch firm, pulling him forward. The cool smoothness of her skin grounded him even as the terrifying prospect of another overflow loomed. Are you afraid, human? He looked at her, at the fierce resolve in her eyes, the desperate hope flickering beneath the danger. Afraid? Yes. Terrified, actually. The idea of merging his deepest self again, but this time amplified by a massive, unpredictable alien artifact, with hostile aliens possibly kicking down the door, was sheer madness. But looking at Lyra, at the vulnerability she had shown him and the strength she was showing now, he knew his answer. Yeah, he admitted, meeting her gaze. But I'm more afraid of what they'll do to you. A faint flicker of the soft, emotional gold appeared on her face, a brief break in the tension. Then we face the fear together, she hummed, her grip tightening on his hand. Let our chaos and my fragmented hope create the wave, let us overflow, and see if it can shatter their will. They moved faster then, a shared determination hardening their resolve. The station was silent save for their footsteps, the darkness pressing in. He felt the familiar pull of her presence beside him, amplified now by the shared danger and the memory of their intertwined resonance. The intimacy they had found wasn't just a private connection. It was becoming a weapon, and the cost of wielding it might be everything. The tension was back, not just emotional or physical, but external, pressing in from the silent, hostile ship that had docked with the station. They reached the central node hub, a vast chamber dominated by a towering structure of woven light that pulsed with deep, slow energy, unlike the frantic flicker of the smaller artifact. It hummed, a sound that resonated not just in his bones this time, but deep within his chest, his very core. The air here felt different, cleaner, charged with potential. Lyra released his hand, moving towards the central structure with reverence. The lights on her face were a mix of determined indigo, urgent red, and a fragile, hopeful gold. This is it, she hummed, her voice filled with awe. The heart of the local network. Untouched. How do we access its full potential? Jax asked, scanning the chamber entrance, his hand on his sidearm. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every distant clang from the station's structure sounded like approaching footsteps. We align our resonances, Lyra said, turning back to him. The gold light on her face intensified, as we did in the smaller chamber. But this structure, it will amplify the output exponentially. It needs a focal point, a connection point. She gestured to a platform in the center of the structure, a disk of smooth, glowing material. We stand there, together, and we initiate the overflow. He walked towards her, joining her by the base of the towering structure. The humming grew louder, vibrating through the floor. He could feel the pull of the node, a powerful, unseen force. Initiate the overflow, he repeated. It sounded clinical, but he knew what it meant. Laying bare their deepest selves, intertwining their energies, their chaos, their sorrow, their unexpected connection. It requires absolute focus, Lyra hummed, meeting his gaze. The gold light flared, then settled into a steady glow, mixed with a determined indigo. We must not falter. The output must be coherent, a single, powerful wave. My chaos isn't exactly known for coherence, he said, a wry smile touching his lips despite the tension. Your chaos, aligned with my focus, it created something unique in the smaller node. She countered, a flicker of rose light appearing on her face, reminding him of the intimacy they had shared. Here, amplified, it could be overwhelming to them. He nodded, the smile fading. He understood. This wasn't just about hiding. It was about weaponizing their bond, their vulnerability. Okay, what do I do? Stand with me, Lyra said, leading him towards the central platform. The material underfoot was warm, smooth. The humming intensified further. Clear your mind of distraction. Focus on your core resonance, the truth you carry, and allow it to merge with mine. Feel the connection we forged. The overflow. They stood side by side on the platform, facing each other. The woven light of the structure pulsed around them. He looked into Lyra's strange, dark eyes, seeing the blend of determination, fear, and trust reflected in the shifting light patterns on her face. He reached out, taking her hands. Her skin was warm, almost hot, radiating heat. The crimson light flared, a fierce, immediate warmth spreading between their clasped hands. Feel the connection, she hummed, her voice vibrating directly in his skull. Feel the resonance. Do not resist the overflow. Embrace the chaos. Let it fuel the wave. He closed his eyes, focusing inward, finding that core she had sensed, the chaotic, wounded truth of himself. He allowed himself to feel the pain, the loss, the anger, the profound aloneness. He didn't push it down. He brought it to the surface. And then he reached out with that feeling, searching for Lyra's resonance, the sorrow, the yearning, the fierce hope. He found it instantly, a familiar counterpoint to his own. The moment their internal resonances connected, amplified by the massive structure around them, was like being struck by lightning. A wave of energy surged through him, not just physical, but existential. His consciousness seemed to expand, merging with Lyra's in a way that made the previous overflow feel like a gentle ripple. He was Lyra, feeling the agony of scattered species, the ancient sorrow of a broken network, the desperate longing for reunification. And he was himself, the chaotic human, his pain and resilience adding a fierce, unpredictable edge to their combined resonance. The light structure around them flared to blinding intensity. A high-pitched whine filled the chamber, growing in volume. Lyra's hum beside him became a sustained, high-frequency note that resonated with the structure's power. The crimson and gold light on her face was a solid, overwhelming brilliance. He felt her presence not just beside him, but within him, her alien consciousness intertwined with his, creating something new, something powerful. He opened his eyes. The chamber was awash in searing light, a city of her light patterns, vibrating with power. He could see Lyra, a radiant figure beside him, her features obscured by the sheer intensity of her light patterns, vibrating with power. And then he saw them, figures appearing at the chamber entrance, dark shapes against the blinding light. The collectors. They wore heavy, dark suits, their faces hidden. They raised weapons, but before they could fire, the wave hit them. It wasn't a physical blast. It was pure resonance, a wave of chaotic, amplified truth and sorrow and hope. He felt it flow from them, through the structure, and out into the chamber, slamming into the collectors. They staggered back, recoiling as if physically struck. He heard shouts, garbled and distorted by the energy wave. Some fell to their knees, clutching their heads. The wave of feeling, his pain, Lyra's sorrow, their combined defiant hope, seemed to overwhelm their shielded minds, their forced unity. The light reached a crescendo, then slowly began to subside, the humming fading back to a deep thrum. The collectors at the entrance were retreating, stumbling back into the corridor, clearly disoriented and repelled. Lyra swayed beside him as the wave subsided, her light patterns dimming drastically, leaving only a faint, exhausted azure. He reached out, steadying her. "They're gone," he breathed, looking at the empty entrance. "Temporarily," Lyra hummed, leaning against him, her body trembling slightly. The wave, it disoriented their convergence. They cannot stand against such uncontrolled resonance, especially combined with pain. She looked up at him, her strange eyes tired but filled with a deep, abiding warmth. The azure light pulsed with exhaustion, but mixed with a soft, Earn gold of success. Your chaos human. It was the perfect counterpoint to their forced order. He held her close, feeling her fragile weight against him. The intense, terrifying connection had worked. Their overflow had saved them, at least for now. But the cost had been immense, not in pain, but in vulnerability. They had shared their deepest truths, weaponized their intimacy. There was no going back from that. The forced proximity and shared danger had stripped away their defenses, leading them through vulnerability to a terrifying, beautiful power. The air in the chamber was still thick with residual energy, but was also filled with something else. The quiet aftermath of profound connection and shared survival. He looked down at Lyra, at the faint gold light on her face, and knew that his life and hers had irrevocably changed. They spent the next few cycles securing their section of the station, reinforcing the entrance to the node hub, and monitoring the collector's ship. The ship remained docked, a silent, ominous presence, but they made no further attempts aboard. Lyra theorized the resonance wave had overloaded their internal communication/convergence network, requiring repairs or a regrouping period. It bought them time that they spent in the quiet intimacy of the central node chamber. The towering light structure pulsed with a low, steady hum, a constant reminder of the power they had unleashed and the bond that had made it possible. The air here felt safe, protected by their shared energy. The days and nights blurred together. They ate their dwindling supplies, talked in hushed tones, and existed in a state of hyper-awareness, listening for sounds of collectors, but also listening to each other. The dialogue flowed easily now, stripped of the initial awkwardness and cynical deflection. Having experienced the overflow, having felt the core of each other's being, there was no longer any pretense. They talked about their past, their fears, their fragmented lives. Lyra spoke of her scattered people, the hope of finding others, the way to being a sole repository of certain knowledge. Jack spoke of his losses, the reason for his walls, the emptiness he'd carried. Their physical intimacy continued, less frantic than the first urgent explosion in the smaller chamber, but deeper, more tender. The light patterns on Lyra's face were a constant, shifting revelation. The soft azure comfort, the hesitant rose of desire, the gentle gold of affection, the brief, fading violet of past sorrow. He learned to read her like a book written in light, understanding her moods and needs without her needing to voice them aloud. And she, having felt his chaos, seemed to understand quiet spaces within him, the words he didn't say. One cycle. As they sat close together by the humming node, Lyra's light patterns shifted to a soft, steady gold. They will return, she said, her voice quiet, repaired, resilient. The collectors do not abandon a prize. I know, Jax replied, taking her hand. He rubbed his thumb over the smooth, warm skin. So what do we do? Unleash the overflow again? Lyra shook her head slowly. The gold light pulsed with a new idea. It is not a weapon to be used repeatedly. The strain on our resonances, it is significant, and they will adapt, shield against it. She paused, her gaze fixed on the pulsing light structure. But the overflow, it showed me something else. It showed me a path within the lattice, she explained. The resonance we created, it aligned with the central node in a way that unlocked a connection, not just an outward wave, an inward possibility. The gold light brightened, mixed with a vibrant green, curiosity, exploration, a possibility of accessing the remnants of the true lattice, not just scattered fragments, but the echoes of the whole. And what would that do? It could allow me to project, Lyra hummed, her voice filled with quiet intensity. Not just a chaotic wave, but a focused signal, a call across the void to any other fragments of my people who might still be resonant. Jax felt a surge of hope, but also apprehension. Could it work? I do not know. The green light held a trace of uncertainty. The lattice is broken. The signal would be weak. It might reach none. Or worse, it might attract others who are, not my people, predators. Like the collectors? Worse, she said, a deep, unsettling shade of indigo flashing across her face. There are older things, more fragmented, driven by instinct, not purpose. So it's a gamble, he concluded. Yes. Lyra turned fully to face him, her hand tightening on his. The gold light was steady now, determined, but it is my purpose, human, to find them, to try and rebuild. It is why I came to this dying station, following the weakest of echoes. He looked at her, at the fierce determination in her eyes, the weight of her species' survival resting on her. He had found her scavenging for parts, a strange, solitary alien. Now she was revealing herself as something akin to royalty, a keeper of ancient knowledge, carrying the burden of her people's future. And their chaotic, unexpected connection had given her a chance to fulfill that purpose. Okay, he said, squeezing her hand. How we do it? It requires a deep, sustained resonance, Lyra explained, the green light returning. Even deeper than the overflow that repelled the collectors. It requires us to maintain that connection at the core level, while focusing the energy through the node. It will be taxing, potentially dangerous. More dangerous than having ourselves stripped by the collectors? Lyra gave a small, alien gesture that might have been a smile, a softening of the lines around her eyes. The gold light pulsed gently. Perhaps not. Then we do it, he said, his resolve firm. He had nothing left to lose. He had found something here. Someone protecting Lyra, helping her find her people. It felt like the first real purpose he'd had in years. It will require your full, chaotic resonance, she warned, her voice serious. No holding back. Allow the pain, the loss, the suppressed truth to flow into connection. It is the turbulence of your being that seems to stimulate the ancient network. He nodded. He understood. His brokenness was the key. His vulnerability was the power source. It was a strange, uncomfortable truth, but side by side with Lyra, it felt necessary. They prepared in silence, the quiet hum of the node structure filling the space. They weren't just two survivors anymore. They were collaborators in something ancient and profound. As the time came, they moved to the center platform, standing together in the heart of the pulsing light. He took her hands, the connection instantly sparking to life, a familiar warmth spreading between them. Lyra's light patterns were intensely focused now, a blend of determined indigo and brilliant, hopeful gold. Ready, human? She hummed, her voice steady. Ready, Lyra, he replied, meeting her gaze. He took a deep breath, letting go of the walls, allowing the chaos within him to rise. The pain, the loneliness, the years of running. He focused it, not as a burden, but as a unique energy signature. Now! She hummed, closing her eyes. The gold light on her face intensified, radiating outward. Feel the connection. Deeper. Embrace the overflow. Let it flow through us. Into the lattice. He focused on Lyra, on the feeling of her presence, the strange, beautiful mingling of their beings. He allowed his chaotic energy to intertwine with hers, feeling the familiar surge of the overflow. This time, it wasn't a blinding explosion. It was a steady, powerful current, flowing from their combined resonances through the platform and into the towering light structure. The structure responded, its hum rising in pitch, becoming a clear, ringing tone that filled the chamber. The woven light pulsed, sending out ripples of energy. He felt his consciousness stretching, reaching out through the node, guided by Lyra's focus intent. He was a beacon, a chaotic, human signal broadcasting across the vastness. He felt Lyra's hope, her yearning, her silent plea flowing through him, amplified, projected into the darkness. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The energy flow was immense, draining. He felt the edges of his consciousness fraying, the weight of his own pain and Lyra's sorrow pressing down. Beside him, Lyra trembled, her hum strained, her light patterns flickering with exertion. They poured everything they had into the connection, into the signal, fueled by their bond, their shared history, their desperate hope. Then, just as he felt he couldn't bear the intensity for another moment, the ringing tone began to subside. The energy flow lessened. The light structure returned to its steady hum. The overwhelming sense of projection faded. leaving behind only the intimate connection between him and Lyra and profound exhaustion. They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, breathing raggedly. The chamber was quiet again, save for the gentle thrum of the node. "Did it work?" he whispered, afraid to break the fragile silence. Lyra opened her eyes. They were tired, but filled with a quiet awe. The light patterns on her face were muted, a soft, peaceful azure mixed with faint, shimmering gold that spoke of success against all odds. "I do not know if it reached them," she hummed, her voice weak but steady. "The signal, it was faint, distorted by your chaos. But it was received by the lattice itself, or a fragment close enough to respond." "Received?" Hope flared in his chest, hot and bright. Lyra nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. The gold light on her face pulsed with certainty. "Yes, I feel a counter-resonance." A reply, faint, distant, but it is there. She squeezed his hand, her gaze locking onto his. "We are not alone, human. There are others." They heard the overflow. Relief washed over him, so powerful it almost buckled his knees. They had done it. Their chaotic, impossible connection had reached across the void. They weren't just surviving anymore. They had initiated something. "They heard," he repeated, a smile spreading across his face, wider than any he'd worn in years. "They heard our chaos." Lyra's tired face softened further, her alien features holding a depth of emotion that mirrored his own relief and joy. The soft gold light shimmered, beautiful and full of promise. "They heard," she confirmed, her voice a gentle, resonant hum. "And now we wait for them to answer the call. Together." He pulled her into a fierce hug, burying his face in the smooth, warm skin of her neck, breathing in her subtle scent. She hugged him back, her slender arms wrapping around him, her body pressing close. The light patterns on her face, unseen by him now, pulsed against the skin. The node hummed softly around them, a silent witness to their improbable journey. From cynical scavenger and exiled alien, through danger and vulnerability and chaotic overflow, to finding each other and sending a signal of hope across the stars. The future was still uncertain. The collectors were still out there, and the vastness of space was still dark and cold. But they weren't alone. They had each other, and the promise of a connection that had spanned species and brokenness. It was a new beginning, forged in chaos and bound by a love that was as alien and unexpected as the light patterns on Lyra's face.